"Stay on the sidewalk, probie." Captain Emmett Vandermolen said it without turning around, one gloved hand already on the pump panel, his voice pitched loud enough to carry across 3 lanes of Belhaven Street. It was 11:40 on a Tuesday night in October, and the 3rd floor of a wood-frame triple-decker was pushing smoke out from under the eaves in slow brown rolls. Half the block stood on the far sidewalk in bathrobes and slippers, phones up. Somewhere behind the crowd, a dog would not stop barking. Delphine Brasseau had been assigned to Engine 12 for exactly 9 hours. She had the supply line over her shoulder, 400 feet of 5-inch hose flaked and ready, and she had not moved since she dropped it at the hydrant. She was looking at the house, not at the front door, where 2 firefighters were already flaking out an 1.75-inch attack line, and not at the 2nd-floor window where a lick of orange had shown itself once and gone. She was looking at the soffit on the Charlie side, where the smoke came out fast and thin and grey-brown, and then, every 8 seconds or so, stopped. Breathed in, came out again. She said it evenly. Emmett Vandermolen turned. He was 31 years old, and he had been a captain for 19 days, and the white leather helmet on his head still had the manufacturer's gloss on the brim. He looked at her the way a man looks at a chair someone has left in a doorway. "Smoke's pulsing out of the soffit line," Charlie sighed. "That's a void fire." She kept her voice flat, the way she had been taught, because on a fireground a raised voice sounds like fear, and fear is contagious. "If your guys go in the 2nd-floor door and open up on the kitchen, they're going to be underneath it when the ceiling lets go." There was a pause of maybe 2 seconds. Behind them, the diesel hammered. She could have answered that honestly. She could have said 17 years and 11 civilian removals, and 4 years riding the back step of Rescue 3, and 9 years teaching search and rescue at the State Academy to men exactly like him. The personnel roster in the captain's office said something different, because the personnel roster in the captain's office said reinstated probationary status, which is what the city's software prints when someone comes back to line duty after a long assignment out of the division, and Emmett Vandermolen had read that line at 3:15 that afternoon and never turned the page. "Long enough to know what pulsing smoke means," she said. The flush came up his throat, red and quick, and disappeared under his collar. He tapped 2 fingers on the pump panel like a man calling a dog. "You're going to stand right here, next to this rig, and you're going to watch, learn something." He keyed his radio and turned his back on her. Ruth Ann Scogland was in the driver's seat, with her hand on the throttle and her reading glasses pushed up into her grey hair, and she had heard all of it. She did not say anything. She had been driving Engine 12 since 1998, and she had learned a long time ago that a chauffeur's opinion is worth exactly as much as her water pressure. The crew went in. It took 4 minutes and 11 seconds. That is not a long time on a clock, and it is a very long time inside a building. The attack line hit the kitchen went dark, and for about 90 seconds it looked like a win, that flat, sudden quiet where the orange goes out of the windows and the smoke turns from brown to grey to white. Then the void fire, which had been eating its way up between the studs for 20 minutes, reached the attic and found air, and the 2nd-floor ceiling opened up like a seam coming apart. Fire rolled out of the light fixtures. Fire came out of the return duct. 2 firefighters came down the front stairs on their hands and knees, with the nozzles still open behind them, and one of them lost his helmet on the porch. Nobody was hurt. That is worth saying, because it was luck and not skill, and everyone standing on Belhaven Street that night knew the difference, even if nobody said so. The rest of it took 2 more hours. They pulled the ceilings on the Charlie side, exactly where she had said, and they found the burned-out knee wall exactly where she had said it would be, and by 2 in the morning the house was a wet black shell with a hole in the roof, and Engine 12 was picking up hose in the dark. Delphine coiled the supply line by herself, 380 feet of it, dragging the couplings up over the tailboard and stacking them flat. Her hands were steady. The neighbors had gone in. The dog had finally stopped. Emmett came down off the porch with soot on his white helmet at last and stopped beside the rig. He had the loose, bright energy of a man who has just gotten away with something and does not know it. "Not bad for a first one," he said. He walked away. Ruth Ann climbed down out of the cab, put both hands in the small of her back and looked at the coiled hose, and then at the woman who had coiled it. "Brasso," she said slowly. Ruth Ann's pale eyes went over her once, the way you check a tool for hairline cracks. "You want the front seat on the way back?" Kingsbridge, Massachusetts, is a mill city of about 90,000 people north of Boston, built along a river that used to run whatever color the dye house was running that week. The mills closed between 1958 and 1991 and left behind acres of heavy timber buildings and 4 neighborhoods of wooden triple-deckers packed close enough to share gutters. Delphine Brasso grew up in the Asheville district, in the second-floor apartment of a triple-decker on Fenimore Street with a mother who ran a commercial laundry press at the county hospital for 26 years and came home smelling like bleach and steam. There was no firefighter in the family. There was no plan. What there was, in the summer she turned 19, was a hiring poster taped inside the window of a corner store and a woman named Oni Redfern standing outside a burning garage on Tannery Row with a pry bar in her hand, telling a crowd of teenagers to get back behind the line, and one of those teenagers not getting back. Oni Redfern was the first black woman to make captain in the Kingsbridge Fire Department. She was 5'4". She ran Rescue 3 for 19 years, and she carried a steel letter stamp set in her coat pocket because she could not stand a piece of equipment that did not have somebody's name on it. She looked at the 19-year-old girl who had not gotten back behind the line, and instead of chasing her off, she asked her what she thought was in the garage. "Paint," the girl had said. "Mr. Dowsonbury keeps paint in there." Oni had looked at the garage, and then at the girl, and then she had keyed her radio and told the interior crew to back out because there was a wall of solvent-based paint on the Bravo side. Then she wrote a phone number on the back of a run report and pushed it into the girl's hand. "Tests in March," she said. "You'll be 20. That is how it started, and the rest of it was 4 years of the worst kind of work. Overnight shifts at a warehouse to pay for the EMT course, 6 mornings a week on a stair machine with a weighted vest. A written exam she failed the first time by 2 points and passed the second time by 11. Oni put her through a search maze she had built herself in the back of the old Asheville firehouse, out of scaffolding, tangled cable, chicken wire, and a section of collapsed floor joists. Blacked-out mask. 40 pounds of gear. Find the dummy, package it, get it out. The first time it took 19 minutes, and Delphine came out of it shaking and furious and crying inside the mask where nobody could see it. Oni made her do it again the same night. "Slow down," the old captain said, crouched by the entry hole with her helmet pushed back. "You're fighting the maze. The maze doesn't care. Sweep low, keep contact with the wall, count your turns." She reached out and knocked twice on the girl's helmet with her knuckles. "The fire doesn't care what you're called." Delphine Brasso made the department in 2009. She made Rescue 3 in 2012. Between 2012 and 2016, she was credited with 11 civilian removals in a city that averages 4 a year across the entire department, and she took exactly 1 commendation ceremony out of 6 she was offered, because she hated standing on a stage more than she hated almost anything. Then Oni Redfern got sick, pancreatic, the kind the fire service has been burying its people with for 50 years. And Delphine put in for the training division so her shifts would be predictable, and she drove her old captain to Boston for treatment 41 times over 14 months. And when it was over, she stayed in the division, because by then she was the best instructor they had. 9 years, 28 recruit classes, 2,200 firefighters in eastern Massachusetts learned to search a room in the dark from Delphine Brasso, and a fair number of them learned the same line off the same knuckles on the same helmet. In February of 2026, the state cut the academy's instructor line by a third, and the city offered her a return to line duty at her old rank, and she took it, because she was 38, and her hands still worked, and she missed the sound the door makes. The clerk in personnel entered it as a reinstatement. The software attached a 90-day probationary flag, the way it does for anyone coming back to a line company after more than 3 years out of one. Nobody thought about it. Nobody ever thinks about it. That is the whole reason a 31-year-old captain with 19 days on the job looked at a 17-year veteran and saw a rookie. To be fair to Emmett Vandermolen, and somebody should be, he had not set out to be cruel. He had come up fast, first on the lieutenant's list at 27, first on the captain's list at 30, which nobody in Kingsbridge had done since the 70s, and he had done it the way a smart, frightened man does it, by memorizing everything. He could recite the department's guidelines by paragraph number. He had a binder in his office with tabs. What he did not have was fires. He had come up through the slow years, a training rotation, a detail to fire prevention, and when he took Engine 12, he had been the officer in charge at exactly 2 working structure fires in his life, and one of them had been out before he arrived. He knew that. It sat behind his sternum all day long like a swallowed stone, and then the city sent him a firefighter with soot ground permanently into the creases of her knuckles, who stood on the sidewalk on his first real job and read the building out loud in front of his crew, and was right. There is a kind of man who hears that and says thank you. Emmett Vandermolen posted a memorandum on the day-room board instead. It went up on a Thursday morning, printed and centred and signed with his full rank, and it said that in the interest of company readiness, all members newly assigned to Engine 12 would complete a remedial skills assessment under the direct observation of the company officer. There was exactly one member newly assigned to Engine 12. Dov Amirkhanian, 24 and 11 months on the job, read it twice and then found somewhere else to look. Ruth Ann read it, took her glasses off, folded them, and went out to check the oil on a truck whose oil she had checked at 0700. Delphine read it, said, "Yes, Captain," and went to get her gear. It happened in the rear yard behind Station 12, on the cracked apron where the department stores the training props, and it happened on the same Thursday that Recruit Class 96 was scheduled for a station tour. 22 recruits in fresh navy T-shirts, 8 weeks into a 16-week academy, standing along the fence with their arms folded exactly the way their instructors stood. The first evolution was a solo 24-foot extension ladder. Carry it 40 feet, throw it to the second-floor window of the training tower, set the climbing angle, tie the halyard. Department standard is 90 seconds, and most firefighters do not love doing it alone. She did it in 51 seconds. The ladder went up flat against the wall, with the beams landing so evenly they made one sound instead of 2. Emmett looked at his stopwatch. "Fly out is the department standard for aluminum, Captain." He clicked the watch and reset it. She brought it down and did it again with the fly-in. 54 seconds. The second evolution was an air pack drill, full protective clothing from a bare start, self-contained breathing apparatus donned and on air. The national benchmark for the whole package is around 1 minute and 40. She did it in 58 seconds, and one of the recruits at the fence said something under his breath, and another one laughed. "That's not the correct hood sequence," Emmett said. He reset the watch. 59 seconds. The third evolution was the Denver drill, and everybody in the yard went quiet when he said it, because the Denver drill is not a skills test. It is a memorial, a room rebuilt to the exact cruel geometry of the one a firefighter died in, window 42 inches off the floor, 3.5 feet of space in front of it. They built it in the yard out of pallet racking and plywood. 200 pounds of dummy in full gear. One rescuer, she got the dummy up and through the window in 2 minutes and 40 seconds, which is a very good time, and she came out on her hands and knees with her legs shaking under her. "Your knee came off the wall on the lift," Emmett said. The yard changed then. It is hard to describe how, but anyone who has ever worked in a firehouse would recognize it. A settling, a stillness, 22 recruits and 3 firefighters and 1 engine chauffeur, all understanding the same thing at the same moment, and none of them able to say it. Ruthann Skoglund put her hand on the fence. "Cap," she said. Delphine went back in the window. She did the Denver drill 3 more times. The 4th one took 3 minutes and 51 seconds because by then her forearms were finished and she had to lift with her hips and her back, and she got the dummy out anyway, and when she rolled off the platform onto the concrete, she lay there for 4 or 5 seconds looking straight up at a flat grey Massachusetts sky with her chest heaving and her mask fogged white from the inside. Behind her, in her head, an old woman with a brass whistle on a bootlace knocked twice on her helmet. "The fire doesn't care what you're called, only what you can carry." She got up. The recruits started clapping. It was not a decision anybody made. It started with 2 of them and ran down the fence in about a second and a half. 22 kids in navy t-shirts applauding a woman lying on the concrete, and it was the loudest sound in that yard all morning. "That's enough," Emmett said, to them this time. His throat had gone red above the collar. "Tour's over." The recruits filed out. She scrubbed the bay floor for 2 hours. It did not need it. Sunday dinner at Station 12 was a thing that predated everyone currently assigned there. Whoever was cooking put $22 on the table and made too much of something, and the off-going shift stayed, and sometimes recruits, or a retiree, or somebody's kid ended up in a folding chair at the end of the long table with a plate. 2 Sundays after the Denver drill, Emmett Vandermolen cooked. He made a sheet pan chicken thing that was genuinely good, and he was easier at that table than he ever was in the yard, and around 8 o'clock somebody asked him the question that gets asked at every firehouse table in America. He put his fork down. "Because somebody came and got me," he said. The room settled in. This is a category of story the fire service knows how to listen to. March of 2014. I was 19. He turned his water glass a quarter turn on the table. "I woke up because the ceiling was orange. That's what I remember. Not smoke, not an alarm. The ceiling was the wrong color. Nobody moved. I remember the floor being hot through my hands." He said it plainly. "And then somebody had me by the belt and by the collar. And there was a mask against my face. He put his own mask on my face. He must have, because I could breathe. And somebody said, right in my ear." He stopped. Dove asked, "Breathe with me." The furnace kicked on in the basement. That was the only sound for a couple of seconds. Emmett rubbed the back of his neck, unconsciously, where the collar covered the glossy patch of graft. "And I never found out who he was. I asked. I filed a records request when I got on the job. The run report has the officer of record and the company, and it's got a line at the bottom, occupant removed by interior search team, and that's it. No name." He reached to his belt and unclipped his keyring and slid something off it and set it on the table. It was a small rectangle of brass, maybe 1.5 inches long, warped into a shallow curve by heat and blackened along one edge. There were stamped letters in it, hand-struck, uneven. Half of them had been erased by whatever it had been through. "That was in my hand at the hospital," he said. "They gave it to me in a bag with my belt buckle. It came off his coat, I think." Dove picked it up carefully and turned it under the light. "Brass," he read. "And then, R3? Rescue 3 got disbanded in 2016, Emmett said. "Whoever it was, he's probably retired." At the far end of the table, Delphine Brasseau sat very still, with both hands flat on either side of her plate. Then she stood up, said something about checking the compartment inventory on the engine, and walked out through the day room into the apparatus bay, where the lights were off and the diesel smell was cold, and she stood between the rear wheels of engine 12 in the dark, with one hand on the tailboard, for a full minute and a half. Ruthann found her there. "You knew," Ruthann said. "Since the first shift." Delphine's voice was level, but she did not turn around. "I've read that report probably 30 times. I was on engine 4 that night." The older woman leaned against the compartment door. She paused. Delphine finally turned around. "Because then he'd owe me," she said, "and a crew that owes you isn't the same as a crew that trusts you." She shook her head slowly. "I don't want to be his hero, Ruthann. I want to be his firefighter." Ruthann Skoglund looked at her for a long moment in the dark. "I know it," said Delphine. "The Ashvale textile mill went at 3:04 in the morning on the second Friday in November. It was 4 stories of 1890s heavy timber, 280 feet long, vacant since 1991, except for the pigeons and whoever needed to be out of the wind. When Engine 12 came around off Fenimore Street, the loading dock on the Delta side was throwing fire 30 feet into a black sky. Emmett Vandermolen keyed his radio, and his voice cracked once on the first word, and then steadied. He did it right. That should be said plainly, because it matters later. He did the 360 lap. He established a water supply on the big main at Fenimore and Arkwright. He set up an exposure line on the triple-deckers across the street. 3 minutes in, when the roof of the single-story annex on the Delta corner dropped with a sound like a train going into water, he pulled everybody back to the sidewalk and called a defensive operation, and that was the correct decision, and any chief in Massachusetts would have made it. What he did not have was room in his head for anything else. At 3:24, a woman came across Fenimore Street in a bathrobe and boots, and got as far as the tailboard of Engine 12 before Delphine caught her arm. "Kids sleep in there," the woman said. "In the dye house, the little brick part, the low part on the far end. They get in through the coal chute. There's 3 or 4 of them. My grandson knows them. The far end. The far end. The far end. Please." Delphine went to the corner and looked. 280 feet from the fire, the west end of the mill was a separate brick section with its own roof and its own load-bearing wall, and there was smoke coming out of it, but it was grey and lazy, and it was moving up, not out, which meant it had not lit off yet. It was taking the smoke from next door. She counted windows. 2nd floor, 3rd from the corner, a single pane broken out of the bottom left, and a piece of blue tarp stuffed in the hole from the inside. Somebody's window. She was already pulling the 28-foot off the rig when she keyed her radio. "Command from Brasso. I have a possible occupant. Bravo side, west end, 2nd floor. Structures separated from the fire building by a masonry firewall and 200 feet. There was a pause of 4 seconds on the fireground channel. On the recording it is 4 seconds exactly. Then, copy. Ruthann Skoglund heard it in the cab, put the pump in gear, and dragged a charged 1 3/4 to the base of the ladder herself, 56 years old, all 200 feet of it, in 90 seconds. Delphine threw the 28 to the 2nd floor at a 70-degree climb, went up with a Halligan and a thermal imager and her personal escape rope, cleared the glass, swept the sill, and sounded the floor inside with the bar before she put a knee on it. Then she went in, closed the door to the hallway behind her. That is the whole point of it. You take one room, you shut the room off from the fire, and inside that room you have 4 or 5 minutes that belong to you. And she went to her hands and knees and started sweeping in the dark. She found him under a cast-iron spinning frame in the far corner, 16 years old, 90-something pounds, wrapped in 2 blankets and a sleeping bag, and unconscious with the pulse ox of somebody who has been breathing bad air for a while. His name was Tobias Amankwa. He had been living in that room for 6 weeks. She got a strap under his arms, put her own facepiece on him because his lips had gone the colour they go, held her breath for the 7 seconds it took to get from the frame to the window, and handed him down the ladder into Ruthann's arms at 3:28 and 40 seconds. At 3:29, on the far end of the building, the Delta wall came down into the street. That is the part nobody was ready for. 9,000 square feet of brick going over at once makes a pressure wave, and the pressure wave took out the windows on the exposure side, and for 6 seconds the entire fireground was inside a brown cloud, with visibility of about a foot. Emmett Vandermolen's voice came over the radio at a pitch nobody at Station 12 had ever heard from him. The companies came back one by one. Ladder 7, par. Engine 4, par. Engine 12, and Engine 12's captain, standing in the dark with a brick cloud rolling over him, counted his crew twice and came up one short, and for 11 seconds Emmett Vandermolen believed he had lost a firefighter on his first big fire. Then the dust thinned, and there she was at the base of the ladder on the far end of the building, 200 feet away, kneeling over a teenager with an oxygen mask in her hand, filthy, alive, and entirely calm. He crossed the lot at a dead run. What he said when he got there, he said in front of 19 firefighters, 2 police officers, a paramedic crew, and a woman in a bathrobe. "You did, Captain." She did not stand up. She kept 2 fingers on the boy's carotid and did not look away from him. "You freelanced." Ruthan's voice, from behind him, low. "I had a charged line at the base of the ladder. You cleared it." Emmett Vandermolen turned around and looked at his chauffeur, and his face in the strobe light was not angry. That was the thing Delphine noticed and never forgot. It was the face of a man who has just been more frightened than he has ever been in his adult life and cannot find anywhere to put it down. He put it down on her. 3 days later, Form 21 came through the department's internal mail. Charges: unauthorized entry into a structure operating under a defensive assignment. Insubordination, conduct endangering department personnel, filed by the company officer, Engine 12, Group 3. Recommended action: immediate removal from line duty pending a hearing of the Kingsbridge Fire Commission, with a referral to the state for review of her interior firefighting certification. Delphine Brasseau read it at the kitchen table in the station, folded it in half, and finished loading the dishwasher. Then she went and sat at a desk in the Fire Prevention Bureau for 11 days, checking sprinkler plans, while the rumor went around the city the way rumors do, and every version of it was worse than the last. Naomi Okafor was the union steward for Local 1841, and she had been doing it for 9 years, and she had a particular way of putting a folder down on a table that made people sit up. "Sit," she said. They met in the back room of the Union Hall on a Tuesday afternoon with the radiator clanking. Delphine talked for 11 minutes. Naomi wrote nothing down for the first 10. "Fireground audio," Naomi said finally. "Channel 3 is recorded continuously by regional dispatch and held for 2 years. Naomi opened the folder. Second, Detective Milo Strand in the arson unit built a time-stamped timeline off the surveillance camera on the auto parts store across Fenimore, because he needs it to prosecute whoever poured the accelerant. Naomi Okafor slid a second folder across the table. It was thick. "Your service jacket." Delphine put her hand flat on the folder without opening it. The steward looked at her for a while. She closed the folder and put both hands on top of it. "It goes in." She stood up and put her coat on. Ruthann Skoglund brought the last piece herself, in a paper grocery bag, and set it on the table in the Union Hall without a word. It was a turnout coat, retired, stiff with age, the reflective striping gone to grey. On the right chest, above the pocket, there was a rectangle of unfaded material about 1.5 inches long and a rectangle of torn stitch holes around it, where something had been ripped away in a hurry. The hearing of the Kingsbridge Fire Commission convened at 9 in the morning on the 4th of December in the City Council chamber, because the department's own conference room could not hold the people who came. The chair was held by Beatriz Souza, who had spent 22 years on the Superior Court bench, and now, retired, chaired 3 civic boards because she could not sit still. She ran the room the way she had run a courtroom, quietly, and with no tolerance for anyone speaking over anyone else. Emmett Vandermolen testified first. He wore his dress blues. He had his binder with the tabs. He was, to his credit, accurate about the fire. He described the second alarm, the 360, the water supply, the annex roof failure, the defensive decision. He described the wall coming down and the evacuation order and the personnel accountability report. His voice was steady until he got to the 11 seconds, and then it was not, and he took a drink of water and kept going. "Thank you, Captain," said Judge Souza. Miss Naomi Okafor did not stand up right away. "Captain Vandermolen, Mr." They played it on the chamber's ceiling speakers, and it filled that room the way fireground audio always does. The diesel roar underneath everything, the flat, compressed voices, the little squelch at the end of each transmission. "Command from Brasseau, I have a possible occupant, Bravo side, West End, second floor, 4 seconds of nothing. Copy. Make it fast." Nobody in the chamber moved. Emmett Vandermolen sat with his hands on the table and looked at the middle distance, and the red came up his throat, and this time it did not stop at the collar. It went all the way to his hairline. "That's my voice," he said. Naomi did not press it. Mr. Milo Strand took 8 minutes. The ladder went to the second floor of the West End at 3:25:12. The subject came down the ladder at 3:28:40. The Delta wall failed at 3:29:06. The evacuation order was transmitted at 3:29:51, and the defensive operation was declared, on the record, at 3:31:04. "So the entry preceded the defensive order by roughly 6 minutes, said Judge Souza. In the third row from the back, a 16-year-old boy in an oversized coat sat next to his grandmother, with his hands between his knees, breathing, out of the hospital, 9 days. Deputy Chief Osric Bramhall spoke last for the department, 57 years old, 33 on the job, a man who chose his words like a person paying cash. "The department's position is this," he said. Firefighter Brasseau performed a vent-enter-isolate search within an assigned time limit, with a charged hose line in place, on a structure separated from the fire building by a masonry firewall and 200 feet, after transmitting her intent and receiving acknowledgement from the incident commander. "That is not freelancing, that is the job." He turned toward the seated firefighters. "That's on us, and I'll say the rest of it, because it's going to come out anyway. Her personnel record in our system carried a probationary flag from a clerical reinstatement code. That flag is wrong. It has been wrong since February. It is the reason a member of this department with 17 years of service was assessed like a recruit in a station yard." "So noted," said Judge Souza. Ms. Naomi Okafor picked up the thick folder. The complaint alleges an unqualified member acting beyond her training. So the Commission should know what it's actually holding. Delphine Brasseau, appointed 2009. Rescue 3, 2012 to 2016. 11 credited civilian removals. Lead instructor, search and rescue, Massachusetts Firefighting Academy, 2017 to 2026. 28 recruit classes. Instructor of the Year, 2021. "She turned a page," said one of the commissioners. Naomi read the next line without any particular emphasis, which was the cruelest way she could have done it, and she knew it. Incident 14-02206, 47 Tannery Row, March 3, 2014. Interior search, second floor, under conditions of 0 visibility and partial collapse. Occupant removed, male, age 19. The chamber went absolutely silent. Emmett Vandermolen did not move for a long moment. Then he turned his head, very slowly, and looked down the table at the woman he had made throw a ladder 4 times in front of 22 recruits. "Say that address again," he said. His hand went to his belt, to the keyring, and it was shaking badly enough that it took him 3 tries to get the little warped rectangle of brass off the ring. He set it on the table in front of him. Under the chamber lights, the stamped letters showed clearly, for the first time in 12 years, BRASS, and below it, R3. Delphine Brasseur reached down beside her chair and lifted the paper grocery bag onto the table and took out an old turnout coat and laid it flat with the right chest facing up so that the torn stitch holes were visible from the gallery. Then she pushed her sleeve up past her elbow and turned her forearm over. The graft ran from her wrist to the inside of her elbow, pale and smooth and shining, the color skin goes when it has been rebuilt. "You had one hand in the doorframe," she said. Her voice was not loud. It never had been. The floor in that hallway was going. "I couldn't get the strap on you, so I went in with my arm and I got you by the belt. My facepiece was on your face." Emmett Vandermolen's mouth moved and nothing came out of it. "You want to know what I said to you?" Delphine said. "Everybody in this room's heard you tell it." She looked at him. "Breathe with me." He put both hands over his face, right there at the table, in his dress blues, in front of the Kingsbridge Fire Commission and 11 rows of firefighters, and his shoulders went. Nobody said anything. Judge Beatrice Souza, who had been on the bench for 22 years and had seen a great many people find out things in public, let the room hold it and did not bang anything and did not call a recess. He withdrew the complaint on the record 11 minutes later, in his own words, without a lawyer touching them. The transmission happened. I answered it. He looked at the commission and not at the gallery. "Whatever falls on me is fine. Nothing should fall on my crew." The commission dismissed the charges with prejudice and ordered the file expunged. Emmett Vandermolen took a letter of censure, was relieved of command of Engine 12, and went back to lieutenant's rank for 18 months with a mandated officer development program. The city paid Delphine Brasseur her lost duty differential, $4,800, and corrected her status. Nobody cheered. Firefighters, as a rule, do not cheer at hearings. They file out into a hallway and stand around with their hands in their pockets and say very little. In that hallway, she found him by the water fountain with the brass tag in his fist. "I don't know how to start," he said. She put out her hand. He shook it. He held on a second too long and let go. Deputy Chief Bramhall offered her Engine 12 that same week, and she turned it down inside of a minute, which surprised everyone but Ruth Ann. The director of training seat had been vacant since June. She asked for that one instead. Bramhall said, "She rebuilt the old dye house at the west end of the Ashvale Mill, the low brick section that had not burned, into a training annex, a search maze on the second floor, laid out from the pencil drawings Oni Redfern had made on the back of run reports in 1997, and a Denver room built to the exact cruel dimensions, and a door prop that a person could open 10,000 times. The program that runs out of it is called the Redfern Cadet Company. It takes 9 kids a year out of Ashvale and Fenimore and the blocks around them, 16 to 19 years old, and it pays them. That was the part she fought the council for, because unpaid programs only ever reach children who can afford to work for free. 2 years of skills, EMT certification, a physical program, and a seat held for them at the next academy class. Cadet number 1 was Tobias Amankwa, who is now 20 and rides Engine 4. Emmett Vandermolen took her 40-hour search and rescue course that spring as a student, sat in the 3rd row, and failed the maze twice before he passed it. He teaches the Vent Enter Isolate Search module now. He is a good instructor. He tells the recruits the story about the ceiling being the wrong color, and he tells it correctly now, and when he gets to the end of it he says she instead of he, and every year some kid asks whether that firefighter is still around, and every year he says, "3rd row, back of the room." Every cadet who graduates gets a small brass tag for their coat. Delphine stamps them by hand on Oni Redfern's old steel letter set, uneven, 1 letter at a time, and she says the same thing to each of them when she puts it in their palm. The fire doesn't care what you're called. Man, imagine carrying somebody out of the worst night of their life, and 12 years later standing in a yard while they make you throw a ladder 4 times to prove you belong there. And imagine keeping your mouth shut anyway because you wanted the respect to be real. If that landed with you, do me a favor and hit that like button and share this with somebody who's been underestimated at work lately. They'll know exactly why you sent it. And subscribe if you want more of these. We put one out every week. So here's what I keep chewing on. How many people are quietly carrying you right now, and you've never once asked their name?